A country with an $880 billion GDP has just sent a massive Bitcoin warning to the rest of the world. So what has this country just done? They've just elected a pro-Bitcoin president, but that is not the most interesting thing that's come out of Poland, the country with an $880 billion GDP. Let's not forget, their central bank said literally this just a couple of months ago. And I do think the timing of their central bank coming out and saying that they will not buy Bitcoin under any circumstances is very interesting when we have a look at when this most recent presidential leader took the lead. But before we get to there, I want to have a look at what exactly is going on in Europe, because I think this election in Poland is very interesting when we start to consider what their neighbor is doing publicly and privately. Of course, we're talking about Norway. Norway is home to the world's largest pension fund and sovereign wealth fund in the world, and we can see here they are saying, look, yes, we don't like Bitcoin, but we're buying MicroStrategy, and they're coming out and saying, look, yes, you caught us. We own MicroStrategy, but it was unintentional. We didn't mean to get the Bitcoin exposure. So today I really want to dive into what exactly is going on in Europe, because I think it's really interesting. Before we start breaking down what is happening in the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, let's check in on what the mainstream media thinks about this most recent election in Poland. Oh, the rise of Karol Nawrocki from hooligan to Polish president. So, of course, the mainstream media is bashing this guy, calling him a nationalist. They're calling him a right-wing nut job. They're calling him a boxer. And that is true. He is a former boxer, believe it or not. But, of course, should we be surprised that the mainstream media is bashing somebody who is pro-Bitcoin, pro-freedom, anti-central banking, and anti-theft, and anti-money printing? I think it's pretty interesting. Let's dive in to see what everybody's saying regarding this most recent Bitcoin announcement. And I think this is really interesting. This is a warning to the rest of Europe, because Europe is the most hostile region in the world against Bitcoin. We all know it. Europe's trying to push forward this CBDC. That's a European CBDC. Everybody's favorite burnt lobster, Christine Lagarde. She thinks that puppy is going to be ready in about 4 months' time. That's October 2025. That's their most recent estimated launch date of that CBDC in Europe. So I do think it's interesting that it looks as if some European countries are trying to get ahead of the curve and adopt Bitcoin while they still can. But of course, Poland is suffering a little bit here, because we can see here, as of February 2025, their central bank came out and they said, we will not buy Bitcoin under any circumstances. Oh, well, what happens if a pro-Bitcoin president is elected in your country? Does that change things? Let's have a look. You can buy a lot and gain a lot, as well as lose a lot, the bank official said. However, we prefer something certain. Oh, almost like certainly losing 10 to 20% of your purchasing power year after year. That is what the central banks want for you. They want something certain. They want something that is a game that is certainly rigged in their favor. That's why they don't like Bitcoin. And why do we think the central bank was saying things like this in February this year? As it was becoming obvious that a pro-Bitcoin president was about to be elected in the country. I'm going to steer away from the speculation in this one. Let's stay on the facts. How about that? Now, I think this is really interesting. This is something I think that's been completely missed, because the headline came out and I don't think it was it wasn't clear with what Poland is doing. But we can see here, as of December 2024, Poland's official reserve assets stood at $214 billion, 22% increase year over year. Why is that? It's because they're buying gold. Don't you think that is a little bit interesting? They're buying gold, and now we have a pro-Bitcoin president being elected in the country home to 35 million people. And hey, a GDP of $880 billion. It's a little bit interesting. So we can see here, the central bank insider did compare Bitcoin unfavorably to gold. And he said that gold helped the bank's reserves increase in value by 22% last year. So that's because they're sitting on a significant amount of gold. Of course, what did the price of gold do last year? Let's take a little bit of a peep at the gold chart. You guys, oh, okay, that's actually really bullish. Gold looks like it's about to explode higher yet again, priced in fiat currency. Priced in Bitcoin, it's a different story. I mentioned it. Let's have a look at the price of Bitcoin. We're at $104,000 at the time of recording. Telling you what, guys, this is looking pretty promising. If you don't have your seats on the rocket ship, I don't know what you're doing. All I'm going to say is that's a great pullback, and I am buying the hell out of that dip. Again, I get paid in Bitcoin, so there's no fiat around here. And if I had any fiat on the sidelines right now, not financial advice, but I would be plowing that into Bitcoin, because I think we are going global right now. It's impossible to argue with that statement. And now we have huge central banks and countries with GDPs bigger than $800 billion quietly FOMOing into Bitcoin and electing pro-Bitcoin presidents. And this trend is only going to accelerate. Let's think back to 2021. Bukele, leader of El Salvador, came out and said, we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender. At the time, everybody thought El Salvador was a joke. Everybody thought that the idea of electing a pro-Bitcoin president was also a joke. What's happened since then? We've seen Donald Trump get elected in 2024. He is now the 47th and 49th president of America, and he's openly a pro-Bitcoin president. He has said, I want every Bitcoin to be mined, made, and minted in the beautiful lands of America. And then let's not forget what happened at the bottom of that continent, South America. We're talking about Argentina. Argentina also elected a pro-freedom, libertarian president who, for the first time in 85 years, broke the status quo in Argentina. They've been voting for socialism for 85 years. And they finally said enough is enough. We're electing the man with the crazy haircut like me and the big mutton chops that I wish I could grow, Javier Milei, because he's different. He's promising change. Again, we are at that stage of the fourth turning. I probably don't have scope to be talking about the fourth turning today, but what I do think is absolutely fascinating is that this trend will accelerate. Poland is just yet another domino that I think people are ignoring. We had Bukele in 2021 start the Bitcoin presidency FOMO. We've now got Trump in 2024, Milei 2023, 2025. We now have a new pro-Bitcoin prime minister leader in Poland, the 21st largest country in the world. This trend will continue, and that is because there is no stopping this train. The money printers are going to have to be turned on, and we are going to continue to see debasement of fiat currency. We're going to continue to see theft and robbery from our trusted leaders and experts all around the world. And why is that? That is because the debt conundrum cannot be solved. There are not many ways that a government can deal with paying back their enormous debt load. They can print the money, devalue the money, and pay back their debt with the devalued dollars. They can enforce capital controls. They can raise taxes on the productive members of society, the business owners and the entrepreneurs. And what they can do is they can open up the borders to the unproductive members of society. I don't want to dive down a cultural and a political tangent today, but let's just say I've been in Europe for about 2 to 3 weeks now, and that is yet another reminder. My experience in Europe has served as yet another reminder of where I am in the world. I am once again in one of the most indebted continents in the world, and that probably explains let's just say the demographics that I'm surrounded by. I'm going to keep this one very PG, and I'm going to try to steer away from those hot and controversial topics. But what I do think is interesting is just be very careful about where you choose to call home. Is your government one of the most indebted countries around the world? They probably are. Well, that's because they're all very indebted. But again, just think about the West. Think about Canada. Think about Australia. Think about many of these big G20 giants in Europe. Spain, France, Italy. I'm in Portugal right now. Think about America, the blue states. Just want you guys to think about where are the most indebted regions in the world and what are the policies that they're following. It's a little bit interesting. They're all following the exact same playbook. Print the money, come up with absolute stupid laws, and get the people on board with accepting, let's just call it what it is, irrational ideas. I'm going to really try to keep this thing PG rated today. But again, just think about who was receiving $1,200, the minorities in California. You're getting $1,200. If I called myself a girl, I'd get $1,200 in California just for calling myself a girl. I mean, I know the haircut's a little bit questionable, but really? I'm going to get back on track. What I think is very interesting is we are in the fourth turning today. Every single time the society reaches where we are today, with the money collapsing in front of our eyes, and I believe where we are today is we're on the precipice of hyperinflation. If you study all the hyperinflationary events, like Germany in the 1920s, or the collapse of the Roman Empire thousands of years ago, we see the exact same things. We see the societal delusions, sexual debauchery, people losing their minds and calling themselves all sorts of crazy things, right? But I'm not going to get into that specific rabbit hole today. What I do think is interesting is that we now have billionaires saying, forget about hyperinflation, super Bitcoinization is already here. So today I want to answer the question. A lot of people say, oh, but I need hyperinflation to see Bitcoin at $10 million. I disagree. And that is because of this new concept called super Bitcoinization that Balaji Srinivasan kind of made popular just this week with this tweet that's kind of broken the internet. So let's pull it up and let's have a look. Super Bitcoinization is already here. Normal inflation is 2% per year, or roughly 0.2% per month. Hyperinflation is 50% per month. But we're kind of somewhere in the middle. So we need a new term. Well, Balaji's coming up with something called super inflation. So let's kind of unravel this little rabbit hole and pull the thread on this ball of wool, because I think it's pretty interesting. So we can see Bitcoin is up 110 million% since October 2009. That is when the first USD BTC trade happened. It was at less than a cent. Today, 5,701 days later, we just hit $109,000. So when you work out the math, again, I love crunching the math. I love bringing out the calculator. We can see that's a monthly compounding rate of 10.41%. That's 10 times the normal inflation rate. Let's really zoom in here so you guys can see what I'm cooking with. So that means the US dollar has devalued against Bitcoin by 10.41% per month. That hits the 5% target we defined for super inflation. I love this term. It's a brilliant idea. I hope it catches on. Because I think we've still got some more maths to break down here, but I think a lot of the Keynesians are kind of saying, look, we don't have hyperinflation. Nothing to worry about. We're allowed to steal 2% of your money every single year. And if it's around that 2% target, you should just ignore all this. Don't worry about it. Yes, you're going to lose half of your money's value in 35 years, but that's so far away. Just forget about that. And people have just been lulled to sleep. They've just accepted that 2% inflation is fine and quote unquote normal, right? Just because a central banker in my neck of the realm, I believe it was an Australian central banker or a New Zealand central banker, just one day in the 1990s said, yeah, we're going to target 2% inflation. And the rest of the world was like, that's a great explanation for printing the money, debasing the money. We're just going to call it a 2% inflation target. and say it's necessary for growing an economy. And now the world's just accepted it, and it's BS. It's absolutely BS. So let's crunch the numbers a little bit more. So yes, we haven't had hyperinflation yet, but superinflation against Bitcoin is already here. We've already got it. Bitcoin's been compounding by 10.4% per month against the US dollar. And when you run the maths, this is 110 million fold. Pretty insane returns when you crunch the numbers. And that is the price of fiat currency against Bitcoin, down by 99.58%. And it's only going to continue. And I think people need to kind of be aware of the very unique era that we are living in, because I don't think enough people have kind of appreciated just how foreign this idea of inflation is. A lot of people think it's normal, and it's just not. It's as simple as that. It is just not. When you really zoom out and you have a look at the inflation rate over, let's call it a 400-year chart, I think this chart beautifully highlights what I'm trying to illustrate for you guys today. The periods of blue here, this is inflation. The periods of red, this is deflation. So you can see for 400 years, we would see cycles of inflation followed by deflation, inflation, deflation. This is because our money was actually tied to something real, that is gold. What happened in early 1900s? Have a look at that. What did happen in the early 1900s? Why did all of a sudden those little pieces of green on the chart completely disappear? There's no deflation anymore. Prices are not allowed to naturally ebb and flow. And that is because for the first time in 7,000 years, we stopped using gold as money. We started using a form of money that can be easily printed and easily created. And I think people just need to understand and recognize that this is not normal. What we're seeing today is absolutely not normal. And when you really zoom out, it becomes apparent just how, trying to think of a politically correct term for this, how abnormal this is, okay? Because it is not normal that we have 2% inflation a year. That's a scam. That's how governments steal our money. I mean, have a look at the cost of living and how this has changed over the past 400 years. This is my favorite chart. Look at it explode in the 1900s. In particular, after that red line on the chart, 1971, after we left the gold standard officially. You can kind of see it creeping up there after we had the first central bank in 1913, but that is neither here nor there. What's going to come in the next 10 years? More volatility. I think you guys need to be prepared for more volatility. And again, I think the fact that we have Balaji talking about these things, it's worth taking note of. Again, the dude has turned $4.7 thousand into $250 million in 13 years. That's a hell of a feat. Yes, you can get lucky along the way buying some crap coins like he has, but you do need to make some intelligent investments along the way to, what, 1,000x your money? No, that's 100,000x on his money. That's huge. He's nearly got a 100,000x return on his money. It's pretty crazy to think about. Again, I think a lot of Bitcoiners are not prepared for that. They're not prepared for the 1,000x that I still think is ahead of us. And again, it's not just me. There's other very bullish people in Bitcoin, like British Hodl, Peter Dunworth. Again, I've been teasing it. That interview's coming. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the day after. We'll see. It's not too far away. But again, I think you guys should be getting prepared for Bitcoin and the 1,000x that I think is still ahead of us. Again, a lot of people have asked me for this. They say, Luke, what do I do when Bitcoin's at 100,000 or $1 million a coin? I've always said you sell your Bitcoin, you take some profits, right? But I've always kind of been wrong when I say that. Because obviously, the best thing you should do is you should never sell your Bitcoin. You borrow against your Bitcoin. And then a lot of people will say, oh, but Luke, I don't want to use BlockFi, Celsius, or FTX. All the companies that we were shitting on in 2022. We called them out. Wasn't popular to be anti-BlockFi, Celsius, or FTX in 2022. Absolutely not. Because there's very little alternatives. Well, now there is actually an alternative. And again, a little bit of an announcement here. Guys, I got a solution to that problem, and that is FIREFISH. FIREFISH is a fully backed, there's no rehypothecation going on this platform. They're a peer-to-peer platform that allows you to borrow and lend your Bitcoin. If you do want to learn more about FIREFISH, the co-founder, Igor, was just on the Stefan Levera podcast. Again, Stefan is a hardcore Bitcoin maximalist. He's far more technically savvy than myself. So if you do want to learn more about FIREFISH and what they're doing over there, I think that's an incredible product. I encourage you to go watch that interview and just check out the platform today. Again, I've partnered up with them because I think it's a much needed product, and you guys can get 30% off the fees on your first loan if you use a promo code Luke. It's capital letters Luke. It rhymes with puke. It's very easy to remember, and it is linked down below. So again, hit the link down below and check it out if you do want to use FIREFISH to borrow against your Bitcoin this bull run. Again, I always tell you guys, don't sell your Bitcoin. Never sell your Bitcoin. Michael Saylor says it himself. Never sell your Bitcoin. You should never be paying taxes. This is why I've partnered up with FIREFISH. I think they're great. All Night High to my man in the chat has already put the specific link for you guys to use. So 100%, check it out. Again, you don't need to use these risky platforms that don't tell you where the yield is coming from. That is because they're rehypothecating your Bitcoin. There's scams out there. I am not going to Montana, sadly, shredded at 60. All Night Hide is going to be off the internet for 2 months. We're going to miss you in the live chat, my friend. I don't think you've missed one in the past year. Yeah, and this is, again, my friends, we call this, like, we kind of, I hope it doesn't sound like we're joking when we say fiat money, whether it's euros, dollars, Australian cuckbucks, or even the Peruvian soles. We call them fun tokens or fiat enslavement tokens. That's what they are. To McLovin's comment in the chat, fiat is an enslavement, financial enslavement. Bitcoin is financial freedom. Congratulations to all of the 499 of you guys who realized that today and early, if you're watching this stream. Yeah, I never plan to stream at the same time as my friends over there at Simply Bitcoin, but I've got a massage that I'm 27 minutes late for that I better get a little bit of a run on for. I'm getting the eyes right now as we speak. So I got to bounce. I got a massage. With all that said, guys, I am super bullish. Thank you to the guys at Simply Bitcoin. That's funny. And again, if you want to know just how bullish me, myself, Peter Dunworth, and British Hodl are, just make sure you subscribe to the channel so you're notified when that interview drops. It's going to be huge. It's incredibly bullish, and I don't want you guys to miss it. So do that if you want to see it when it drops. And with all that said, guys, I'm going to see you guys in the next live stream. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.